1, 2, 3, 4. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Welcome to Crazy Chester. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Yeah, Crazy Chester's Radio Hour. Crazy Chester's Radio Hour.
Welcome to the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. My name is Andreas Werner. I'm a record producer, songwriter, and owner of Crazy Chester Records. The theme song you just heard is performed by Wet Willie's Jimmy Hall and Funky Chester. The Crazy Chester Radio Hour is a weekly music talk podcast featuring an eclectic group of guests with musical hearts, minds, and souls. And many of the episodes will dive deep into the rich history of music mecca Muscle Shoals. My guest today is Lynn Williams. Lynn is the drummer of the Wallflowers and the Muscle Shoals Allstars and has toured or recorded with Delbert McClinton, John Hiatt, Roy Parnell, Billy Joe Shaver, Bonnie Bramlett, Marcia Ball, and many others. Lynn and I have been friends for several years, and we work together on many sessions and shows. That's him on the theme song of the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. Lynn, thanks for being my guest today on the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. We've known each other for, I guess, almost 10 years now. Yeah. And we've had many opportunities to work together, which is always a treat for me. But you were born and raised in Amarillo, Texas.
That's right.
What's some of your earliest memories of music around you?
Well, my dad was in the music business. He had a nightclub there in Amarillo for 30 some odd years. And so my first memories are listening to my dad play. I would go to his club on Saturday afternoons and help him clean up, like put the dance floor wax on the dance floor and sweep and, do that kind of stuff. And then when I was done, I would sneak up on the bandstand and sneak up on the drums and play stuff. So my really first memories are just my dad playing, and listening to him learn songs for his band, because it was a dance band, and his deal, he always said that if you can't get people up and dancing, you're not very good, you're not gonna make a living doing that.
What instrument did your dad play?
He played upright bass and rhythm guitar, and at the club he was the rhythm guitar player and the leader of the band. But in the early days, in the 40s and stuff, he played some bands. He would play upright bass, and others he would play rhythm guitar. Yeah.
Was drums your first instrument?
No, I actually started on guitar. My older brother and I, he took us to have guitar lessons, and I forget how old I was, maybe 3rd, 4th grade, something like that. And when my brother was taking his lesson, I would sit out in the lobby, and the guy had a drum catalog, I think it was a Ludwig catalog. And so I would sit there and look at the drum catalog and drool over that. So by then I was really drawn to the drums. I was already playing on, at home, putting chairs and whatever else I could do to emulate a drum set. That's what I would do, and have sticks or whatever. Yeah. Little pieces of wood for drumsticks, or whatever I could find. So I was drawn to the drums really early.
Yeah.
So and in fact, when I think I was, maybe 11 or 12, something like that, we were eating dinner one night, and my dad got a phone call, and he got off the phone and he was like, "Man, I don't know what I'm going to do." And they were like, "Well, what's going on?" He said, "Well, my drummer's sick, and I don't know what I'm going to do." And so everybody in the family just kind of looked at me. Of across the dinner table and said, well, why don't you just take him, you know? You know, 12 years old.
Yeah.
And,
Have you had any lessons by that point, or do you just self-taught?
I never had any lessons. I was always self-taught. I didn't really take lessons until I was in high school, like a sophomore in high school.
Yeah.
But everything else was just self-taught. So, you know, so I went to the gig with him, and I, you know, I knew how to play like country shuffles and stuff like that. And on the way to my dad's club, my dad looks at me and goes, "Now you know how to play a waltz, don't you?" And I went, yeah, I know how to play a waltz, you know. And I'm sure I'd played one before, you know, or maybe, I don't think I was smart enough to, you know, fake my way through it. But anyway, but so it was, I don't really remember anything about that night other than everything went smooth and everybody was like amazed that I was so young and could do that. But to me, it wasn't any big deal. It's just like, that's just what I enjoyed doing, you know, so.
Yeah. You mentioned you didn't take any lessons really till up to high school. Did you play in a marching band in school at all?
No, I wanted to. I mean, the like in elementary school, it was a small school, and they had a, you know, school band there, and so I wanted to play snare drum, but there was only two spots for people playing snare drum, so they said, we're full, so what else do you want to play? And so I don't know why, but I picked trombone, and so I played trombone in what, 4th and 5th grade, maybe 6th grade, I can't remember. And then once I got in junior high, that I was never in band. I was in choir, you know, but I think I was in 8th grade in junior high, and that's when I was in my first band. You know, some older guys found out that I played drums, and we jammed one day at school, and then we started this band, and we would play, you know, little dances and stuff.
Was that like rock and roll, or was that Western swing?
Yeah, it was like whatever. Like, gosh, I remember like Led Zeppelin, you know, Jimi Hendrix. Like our guitar player, he didn't have, you know, nobody had any money or great equipment or anything, but he had, which nowadays everybody would want this, like Silvertone amps.
Yeah.
Different amps like that, which back then were just cheap.
Yeah, the Sears and Roebuck.
Yeah, nobody wanted
catalog.
that stuff. But he would find all these, as many cabinets as he could, and stack them up as high as he could, and somehow wire them all together. And so we just wanted to be
loud.
Yeah, we wanted to be Jimi Hendrix, you know, and Mitch Mitchell and all that, you know. So that's one of the first bands, and so, you know, we would play Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, and we would do Creedence Clearwater, you know, stuff like that. So, yeah, and then that's kind of where, I don't know, really started playing in bands was when I was in 8th grade.
Yeah. So when you like copied those records, did you mainly like listen to the original and try to emulate it, or did you? How was your approach? How did you learn?
I tried to copy those parts as close as I could get it, you know, and I don't know, I mean, I'd have to hear if there were any recordings. I don't know how close we got, but that's what I tried to get as close as I could, you know. I'm sure there's certain things that I probably missed, you know, but yeah, I just tried. I never tried to do my own thing, you know. It's like I tried to learn all their fills and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So.
And you just told me earlier that your dad told you that as long as you can make the people dance.
Yeah. If you can make them dance, then you'll be all right. You can make a living, you know.
Yeah.
But if they're not dancing, it's not good.
Not good. Did you were you at all interested in like finding out who some of the drummers were who played on the recordings, or was it just like the track?
Yeah, I was, I always wanted to know, and of course, with those bands, you always knew who the players were in the bands, but some of the records, and maybe I just didn't look deep enough, but sometimes I couldn't find, like for instance, Three Dog Night. I always was a fan of that drummer, but I never knew his name.
Yeah.
And bands like that. So I always wanted to, but there were a lot of times when I didn't have any idea. I just knew that I liked whoever that guy was. I liked that.
Yeah, and up to a certain time, credits were not very common on records either.
Right. Yeah. And and then we've done a lot of stuff down in Muscle Shoals and stuff like that, and I remember hearing all of those records. Some of the early stuff, like the Aretha Franklin stuff. Me being younger and just starting out playing, I was a Led Zeppelin, like I said, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, all, rock and roll, that's what I wanted to play. And so I wasn't really drawn to that music initially. It wasn't until years later that I was like, wow, I wish somebody would have sat me down and went, you need to listen. You may not like this, but you really need to listen to this, because this is really good.
Do you remember the moment where you thought, well, that might be a career?
I think from the very beginning, like I can remember, being 12, 13 years old, listening to Beatle records, and just, imagining myself doing that. That's all I wanted to do. And really I never remember thinking of, well, maybe I should, do better in school and go to college. And none of that other stuff was ever an option for me. That's just what I wanted to do. And of course my parents too, they were always really encouraging. My mother she was like my biggest fan. She would see Buddy Rich on TV and go, you can do all of that stuff, I'm like, that's not true. Even now it's not true. He was so incredible, but anyway, she was just a big fan. She was real encouraging, and Dad was too. I think more so Mom than Dad, just because Dad was in it.
Yeah.
He might have chosen another avenue, but yeah.
Let's just talk about your dad real briefly, because you told me that not too long ago you actually discovered that your dad would also write songs. Tell me a little bit about that story, about one of your songs making it into a movie.
Yeah, well, I knew that my dad had written songs, and I knew that he was part of a Western swing band back in the Panhandle called Sons of the West, and so I knew about all of that stuff. But all of a sudden one day, fast forward to, gosh, what year would it have been? Maybe early 2000s, something like that. Anyway, I was playing with Delbert McClinton, and so our road manager forwards this email to me and says, this guy's been trying to get hold of you. And so anyway, long story short, they went through all this, jumped through all these hoops trying to find where I was. Anyway, this guy who was like a song plugger for this movie. The movie was called The Killer Inside Me. And so the guy that was putting all the music together for this movie was a big Western swing fan. And so he contacted me and said, hey, do you know anything about this song called Old Fashioned Waltz? First of all, he asked me, was your dad Jess Williams? I said, yes. And he said, well, this is a song that your dad wrote like in 1941. And I said, well, I don't have any idea. And, anyway, so, he had these contracts sent to me and stuff. Anyway, so they had the song in the movie, but I had no idea he had written that song. And it started making me think, well, I wonder how many other songs were there that maybe we don't know about, So then that kind of led me down that rabbit hole of the whole Western swing and the Sons of the West and all that stuff, and I started listening to all these old Western swing songs that he was a part of. Some of them he helped, he co-wrote, but this one he wrote by himself. So yeah, it was real, just kind of out of the blue. So it's kind of a lesson of, you might write a song and you never know where it's going to end up, like that one 60 years later.
Yeah.
So
in high school you were playing already, and what was your first experience in the recording studio?
Man, I can remember it. I was taking lessons from this lady who taught at the college there in the town when I went to school, and she was good. She did a lot of she played drum set, and then she played mallets and stuff like that. But anyway, I remember there was this sax player in Amarillo that wanted me to play on one of his songs, and he had it charted out and stuff, and I think it was like a 12/8 kind of thing, and I just remember being basically scared to death, and I don't remember how it ended up or any of that stuff, but I remember my teacher being there and helping me read the chart and kind of helping me through it, but it wasn't it was just one song, but it wasn't a very enjoyable experience.
Okay. Did any of your early bands ever go into the recording studio?
Yeah, there was one of the bands we did. We just went into. There was a guy in town that had a studio, and gosh, I think we went in like one morning, early afternoon. It might have been like for 3 or 4 hours, and just recorded all these songs. Basically, just you sit up and play live.
Yeah.
And I mean, but that felt more like just playing a live gig than actually doing a recording.
Sure.
So.
And then a little later, you got a chance to work with Norman Petty in Clovis, New Mexico. How did that come about? Well,
I had met Norman, one of these bands we had together when I was in high school and stuff, and I'd met Norman because he came to hear us one time when we were playing somewhere around Clovis. Anyway, he came to hear us. We wanted to get a record deal, and so he came to hear us, and that's the first time that I met him, and nothing happened with any of that stuff. And then a few years later, this friend of mine in Amarillo that had a music store, he knew Norman and was friends with him, and that's how I got reconnected with Norman. And then I went over there and did one project. I can't even remember what it was, and it was me and this other friend of mine, guitar player and a bass player, and he liked it, and he liked us, and we had fun and enjoyed hanging out with each other, and so I would go over there 2, 3, 4 times a year and do stuff, and it's always fun. It was always real creative, and he just let us kind of go wild and whatever we wanted to do.
Yeah.
Let us do it, and if it got too far out there, he would, he'd let you know. But he was always really diplomatic about it. He never said that was awful, but he would just go, "Why don't we try something else?" So he was. It was a good learning experience going over there.
Did he ever talk about Buddy Holly much?
He did a little, not a whole lot, you know. You know, there was always that story of, you know, he did this to them and, you know, to Buddy and he, I don't know, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, but he, every now and then he would talk a little bit about it, but not really, you know. It was just kind of like he was beyond that, you know. That's kind of water under the bridge, and he was just ready to move on and
Yeah.
try to do something else.
Sure. So, what started taking you out of the Amarillo region?
Well, gosh, the first, well, I was playing in different bands around Amarillo, and then a friend of mine had moved to Oklahoma City and had started playing with this. It was a contemporary Christian group called Farrell and Farrell, and this was like in 1980, and so they came to Amarillo and I played with them one night, and it was fun. I really enjoyed it, and it seemed like it was something that I would like to do and would be a good thing for me to do. And so I moved to Oklahoma and started playing with them, and then in Oklahoma there was like 3 studios that I started getting work, doing some studio work there, and so I was in Oklahoma City for, let's see, I moved there in 80, and then got married in that time, and then my wife and I, we moved here in 89. But I think it was like 86, I got called to come to Nashville and do an audition for this other contemporary Christian artist, Russ Taff, I was a big fan of his. I liked his music. And so I came and auditioned, and I got the gig, and they said, well, I said, well, I don't want to move. And they said, well, you don't have to. You can just commute. And so for about, I don't know, a year and a half or so, I would fly in, do gigs, and then they'd fly me home. And then we did a record here. We did it at the Bennett House down in Franklin. And so after we did that record, then I went back to Oklahoma. And I just felt like I was, you know, I always wanted to know, what are y'all doing now? You know, what are you working on? And, you know, how's the record going? And so it just made sense that we should just move to Nashville. And so then it, you know, and at that point I was doing sessions and then playing clubs and all that kind of stuff. And I felt like I had gone as far as I could go there. And it was a great experience. But I just felt like if I couldn't go any further, then I needed to just find something else and do music as a hobby, you know. But then all this stuff with Russ happened, and then so I figured, you know, might as well move to Nashville and just see what happens. Better to say that I tried than to wonder what if.
Yeah, I can relate to that. That's what got me started here too.
Yeah.
The chances might be ever so small, but you don't want to be looking back 20 years later. It's like, why didn't I try when I could?
Yeah, yeah. And that was an even bigger step for you. I mean, a whole different country, culture, and all that stuff. But me coming from West Texas to Tennessee was almost like another country.
Yeah.
So, anyway, but yeah, it's, you know, and how many years is that? 25?
Almost 30 years, I guess.
30 years, yeah.
So what was your next step after Russ Taff?
Well, I came here and when we moved here, I was still playing with Russ, and I remember we went out on a like a little mini tour, and it was coming to an end, and Russ was friends with John Hiatt, and he knew that John Hiatt was putting a new band together, and so he told John that he should give me a shot at auditioning, and I didn't really know. I had no idea who John Hiatt was. So anyway, so I went to the audition, and it all went good. Got the gig, and so I can look back and golly, nearly everything I've done has started with Russ. You know, it's kind of like this wagon wheel. This just kept getting bigger and bigger. You know.
How long were you with John Hiatt?
Not long, about 8 months. Something
Okay.
like that.
But when you were with him, you went to Muscle Shoals for the first time.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. It was. We went down there, and I obviously, you know, I knew of Muscle Shoals and I knew about it, but I didn't know any of the players' names. You know, like we talked about before, credits and all that kind of stuff, and which at that point I should have known more than I did. But anyway, so we're at Muscle Shoals Sound, and so. We're doing some song for some movie, just one song. And so we got all set up, and so I'm walking in the hallways looking at all the gold and platinum records on the wall. And so I see this guy coming down the hall, and he's got a baseball cap on, and you know, just looks like a ordinary guy, you know. And so I introduced myself, and I said, "What's your name?" He goes, "David Hood." And I said, "Oh, well, it's nice to meet you, David." I said, "So do you work around here?" And he was so nice. He just looked at me and went, "Yeah, I do. I sweep up and clean up and just do a few things around here." And I went, "Oh, cool." And then, of course, it wasn't long after that I found out who David Hood was. And, you know, I could have crawled in a hole and died. And then, you know, you fast forward a while, I don't know how many years it would have been, and then I got to work with David, and all those, you know, with David and Jimmy, and man, and well, Barry wasn't there, but trying to think who was playing keys then. Well, Clayton Ivey.
Clayton or Randy McCormick, man.
Yeah, and so you know, got to play with those guys, and then I was talking to David about that, and I reminded him about that story. Of course, he didn't really remember that situation, but you know, he just laughed, and he, you know, it wasn't any big deal to him. You know, he was like, I probably would have, you know, I would have done the same thing. You know, so it was really, you know, what an honor to get to meet those guys and actually play with them. You know, I remember sitting in that studio. You know, I guess the drums were set up where Roger would have been set up, and then looking out across there and seeing David and Jimmy. It's like, man, I'm in rock and roll heaven.
Yeah.
You know?
But you actually have family history down in the Shoals.
Yeah, I do. Once we moved here, my dad came to visit, like in, I don't know, 1990, something like that. And turns out he had a cousin that lived in Florence, Alabama, which I never knew. I didn't know. And so we drove down there to visit her, and she had this son. Of course, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, but anyway, he knew all the family history. And then that's when I found out that the Williams side of the family had moved from the Muscle Shoals area to East Texas. And so my family history started in Florence, Muscle Shoals area. And so I never knew that until, you know, 1990.
Yeah.
So pretty cool.
Yeah, maybe that's why your backbeat is where it is.
So maybe, who knows? Yeah, you know, I don't know. It's just so weird. I think if I would have known about that earlier, and was, you know, hip to the whole Muscle Shoals thing, I would have been like a lot of other people, and you know, right out of high school, I probably would have come to Muscle Shoals. You know, just to be around all that stuff. You know, I would have never attempted to, you know, or to be able to watch Roger play, you know, how awesome would that have been?
Yeah. So, did you get the Roy Parnell gig right after John Hiatt, or?
Well, after Hiatt, yeah, a year or so after that, I played about a year with T. Graham Brown, and then started working full time with Leroy. I'd done a couple of a few one-offs with him before that, and then started working with Leroy. Yeah.
And you still play with him occasionally too, and have done at least maybe half a dozen records.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a bunch of records together, and you know, Leroy's like a brother. You know, always, every chance I can, you know, I can go work for him. I would always enjoy it. You know, it's always fun.
Yeah, and that band, many of the members of that band eventually became members of Delbert's band too.
Yep. Yeah.
Were you the first one, or
no? Kevin was the first.
Was Kevin the first one?
Yeah, he's the first one that started playing with Delbert, and then, gosh, I think nearly all of us have. Well, you know what though, James was the first one.
Okay.
Because James played with Delbert in the early days, like in the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, so James was the first one, but from Leroy to Delbert Kevin was the first one.
Who was the drummer before you in Delbert's band?
I'm trying to think. I think just before I joined, I think it was Andy Peak.
Okay. Because I think there for a while he had Sammy Creaston was in it for a while, I guess. Brian Owings was in it for a while. Frosty was in for a while.
Frosty, yeah. And I mean, he's had, you know, a lot of great drummers. You know, people ask me, why is it that you were there for so long? Because I was there 12 years, I think. And, you know, the rhythm section that I came in with was a great rhythm section. And so I guess maybe I maybe paid more attention to that rhythm section, and maybe by then Delbert had just given up and said, well, he'll do. I don't know.
Was George Hawkins the bass player then?
George Hawkins was the bass player, and Todd Sharp was the guitar player. Kevin was playing keys, and then Terry Townsend and Don Wise.
Yeah.
The horn players. Yeah, great band. I mean, every rhythm section that I was a part of with Delbert was great. Yeah, real fortunate to be able to be a part of that, you know. So yeah, and a lot of those guys we still work together now, you know.
Yeah, and the last version that I guess was with Delbert for quite a few years too. Mm-hmm. And you called yourself Stick 50. That was Kevin McKendree, Rob McNelley, Steve Mackey, and yourself.
Right. Yeah.
So that was to me, that was like when that got together, that was like with Rob, you know, singing the harmonies the way he did.
Yeah.
That was certainly a real strong rhythm section right there.
Yeah, it definitely was, you know. And again, like to go from the first rhythm section with Todd and George, I mean, you know, that was great. And then, I mean, how many times do you get another band together and it's just as good, maybe a little bit better, you know?
Yeah, and you're still playing with Todd too every now and then.
Yeah, I still work with Todd some, and then Steve Mackey and we've been working together since Leroy, since about 91.
And we talk about some of that here in a minute too.
Yeah.
But as Stick 50, you guys decided to make a record. Yeah. And that's around the time where we actually met too, and I met Kevin and everybody. Right. How did that record come about?
Well, we just decided that we wanted to do a record, you know, as Stick 50. And I don't know why we just decided, okay, let's just go in the studio. It was in Kevin's studio. And we're going to do one song a day. So we would go in and we'd set up. We didn't have any headphones when we did the rhythm tracks. We didn't have headphones. We would just start playing, and we didn't have any idea. We would just get a musical idea down. So somebody would start playing something, and that would lead to, you know, I can't remember exactly how some of these songs came together, but like for instance, like if maybe I played some groove and then, you know, Rob started playing some lick, and then it just, or Rob played a lick, and that's how it all came together. That's how the song started. And so we would get an idea and develop the music idea and arrange it, and then get the basic track down, and then we would go in the control room and figure out, okay, what are we going to write about? What's this song about? And then write the lyrics, you know. And then at the end of the day, aside from overdubs, the song was done. So we did that one song a day. So 11, I think there's 11 songs on there. 11, 12 days. We had the record written.
Yeah.
So it's a good record, you know. It was a lot of fun to do. So, yeah.
Yeah. Also, I guess while you were playing with Delbert, you got to start to do some session with Johnny Sandlin producing. How did that come about?
Well, it came about. Actually, it was a Leroy Parnell record that he produced. That was the first time I ever worked with Johnny, and that was done at Muscle Shoals Sound. And so that's the first time I ever.
What's that called? Tell the Truth or something like that?
Yeah. And so anyway, got to work with him, and you know what an honor that was, you know. And then so he called me, you know, a few times on different projects, you know. So I would go down to his place,
in Decatur, yeah.
At his home studio and record stuff with him, you know.
Yeah.
What a great guy too.
He sure was.
Yeah.
And you did. There's at least the Bonnie Bramlett record I remember.
Yeah,
that was really good.
A few of those tracks on that, and you know, when I think back on that stuff, I just think, man, you know, I mean, when you're in the middle of it, you know, you're just concentrating on what you're doing. But if you can really sit down and realize where you are and what you're doing, you know, what an honor it is, you know. So, yeah, I always liked being around Johnny. Real, you know, sweet spirit guy, you know. So.
Yeah. So, you were with Delbert for about 12 years, if not more, and then that comes to an end.
Yep.
He decided to tour a little less, I guess, and you guys had, you know, to do other things, obviously, too. And so what came next for you after the Delbert phase?
Well, after Delbert, you know, for, I don't know, a year, 2 years, something like that, you know, I would just, you know, do some sessions whenever they came up, and just whatever other live gigs, you know. And then I ended up doing this session for a friend of mine that was producing, I don't know, I can't remember who it was, but he was producing this thing, and he had, man, there were a bunch of players on this session. It seemed like there were like 3 or 4 guitar players, it seemed like. Anyway, and one of the guitar players was a guy named Stuart Mathis. And so I met Stuart that day, and we hit it off, you know, and he's done a bunch of stuff, but he'd been with the Wallflowers for a long time and played with a bunch of other people too. And so, you know, we hit it off, and I'd go down to his place and we'd kind of jam and record and do some stuff, and then fast forward, I don't know how many years later, 3 or 4 years later, then he called and asked me if I'd be interested in playing with the Wallflowers. And I said, yeah, sure. When do we start? You know, and so, yeah. And so that's what I've been, you know, doing. I do a few Leroy Parnell dates, and then mainly the Wallflowers, and then I still do sessions, you know.
Yeah. For a while you did some gigs with Steve Wariner too.
Yeah, I did. You know, well, I worked with him for about a year, I guess. You know, and he didn't work. He didn't work a lot, but it was always, you know, good work, and I always enjoyed Steve. You know, he's a great guy, a lot of fun to be around. You know, so yeah, and I did actually played on 2 or 3 songs on his last record. So
yeah, and I guess around the same time the Delbert thing ended, we started going down to Muscle Shoals.
Right. Yeah.
And
it's all your fault.
Yeah, I'll take credit for that.
Yeah, you will.
I'll take credit for that. So anyway, what happened was, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, maybe even more, Roger Hawkins, their original drummer, retired. And when I started going down there, they were without a drummer, and they would, use different drummers to play with. And I worked with you in the studio before, and I thought, I'll be damned if that's not going to work. I knew it. It was the right feel. It was the right pocket. I knew it was going to work. And I met the people who put on the Pareto Soul Festival, and we started working on getting a Muscle Shoals band, a Muscle Shoals themed show together for their festival in Italy the coming summer. Right. So I'm like, let's try that. And actually, I think we might have done one session before, actually, where we all went into the Nut House and worked. Yeah. And that certainly gave me the confidence to know that that's the right match. Yeah. So anyway, to make a long story short, you're playing with the Muscle Shoals rhythm section, or the surviving members of the Muscle Shoals rhythm section. Yeah. How does that feel like?
Well, again, it's such an honor. I mean, it's like getting to play with the Beatles or something, I mean, a rhythm section that has had that much history, on American music, and all the hits that they played on, and get to be a part of that rhythm section. I mean, it's, that just doesn't happen every day, and and I'm real thankful and feel and blessed that I got to be and still get to play with those guys, So, and I have to thank you for putting that all together too,
Yeah, but I mean, that's totally mutual. I mean, they would say the same things about you.
Well, that's the thing is to, I remember, I forget what we did something down in Muscle Shoals, and I don't know if it was, one of those Hall of Fame shows or something. Anyway, so I get home and I get this text from David, and I actually still have it because I don't want to get rid of it. He says, "You're a badass," and I'm like, that's David Hood sending me a text saying I'm a badass. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I remember we were down in Pareto, and they would live stream the show, and some of our family was able to see the show on the computer, and Roger Hawkins would watch the show. Oh, I remember. And he got in touch with Jimmy and David and said, "Hey, I'm so proud of you guys. You sound so good." So
I remember that night too, and it's probably good I didn't know Roger was listening. So yeah, and it's, again, what an honor that is, and to have Roger Hawkins say that he thought it sounded really good, that Roger Hawkins is a guy that Steve Gadd looks at and goes, Steve Gadd learned from Roger Hawkins, so You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
he's just had a huge influence on all of us, whether we know it or not, you know.
Absolutely.
Hope I get to meet him one day.
Yeah, you will.
Yeah.
And Mickey Buckins was a member of that collective of players we've been
Right.
playing with too, and he played percussion on a lot of the hits down there coming out of Muscle Shoals Sound and Fame. Tell me a little bit about him or the two of you.
Well, I remember the first time I was around Mickey, and you know, and all those guys. Anytime you're around them, they don't treat you, or they don't feel like they should be treated special because of who they are or what they've done. They're just regular guys that like to play good music, you know. And Mickey was the same way. And you know, and again, to have somebody of that caliber and it has that kind of history to appreciate what you do is a huge honor, you know. So yeah, and you know, Mickey's just, I don't know, he's funny. He just you can just tell he loves to play and be around musicians, and he loves what he does. And to me, that's just makes it so much more fun to be around him, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you've had the chance to play all over the world with all, you know, different artists.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any venues or places you've played that stick out especially?
Oh man, I'm trying to think. You know, I mean, obviously, one thing that comes to mind right now is what we did in Paretta, Italy, because I'd never been to Italy before, and that was to be there for what, 3 days, 4 days.
Yeah.
That was a great. I mean, we were working, but it was a great vacation. Got to bring my wife, and you know, be in Italy, and you know, wake up with the big wooden shutters and open the windows, and I don't know. It was just that was a real special trip for me, especially get to know all of those guys better, you know, and their wives and stuff. But I don't know, as far as other like towns or venues, I really can't think of one thing that really sticks out, you know. I don't know, I guess after a while it kind of all runs together.
Yeah, and some really large venues in UK too, especially now with the Wallflowers.
Yeah, some of those bigger venues they are real fun, but you know, a lot of times the smaller venues that are real intimate are even more fun.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know. I guess maybe I should have a special one that sticks out, but I would just be making up stuff. Something, but
What about sessions? Is there anything, if you like, you know, like on top that you say, hey, this is like a bucket list session or something like that?
you know, the Muscle Shoals stuff is up there. You know, but working with Delbert was a big one. You know, he won, or actually we won, I think 2 or 3 Grammys while I was with him. You know, and I'm getting to work with Don was a real treat. You know, and that was with Delbert. He produced. Actually, it was the last Delbert record.
Yeah, Acquire Taste.
Yeah. So that was really cool to get to work with him, and you know, just kind of sit back and listen to the stories. And it's the same way with those guys down in Muscle Shoals when they start telling stories and you know different situations they were in. I love those stories like that. You know. Yeah, I mean, Muscle Shoals and working with Don was, and you know, that's probably up there.
Yeah. And a year ago, we did a 40th anniversary celebration of The Last Waltz,
Right.
where we played, you know, a lot of the band's classics, but also some songs that Levon Helm recorded down in Muscle Shoals with the Muscle Shoals Rhythm section. What was your take of that? Like, you know, studying Levon and his drumming, and
Yeah.
what insight into his, you know, thing did you gain?
Well, when you called me about that, you know, I was excited to get to do it and be a part of it, and knowing that you know, there's people, you know, huge band fans and huge Last Waltz fans, you know, that, you know, they know that stuff inside and out. So, you know, after you asked me to do it and then you sent me all the material, I just tried to sit down and really, I didn't want to play it like lick for lick, because that's not, it would have been different every time he played it anyway. But I just wanted to get the basic, as close as I could, the basic vibe and feel of what he did, you know, and you know, and the show turned out really, really good, you know, and I think as a band we did that, you know. But I just as far as Levon's stuff, you know, because it's really hard to emulate him, you know, because he has such a distinctive feel in the way he played.
He sure did, and the vocal was incorporated in all of that too.
Yeah, yeah. And so, you know, that affect how he played also. But you know, you can go listen to different songs and you hear different versions of that and how it's played differently.
Yeah.
You know, so I kind of, some of that stuff I would hear 2 or 3 different versions, like live versions of it, and then try to take a general idea from all of them, like a conglomerate of all of them. You know?
And I must say, first of all, hugely, you know, thankful how much time you put into it to actually study it, down to, you know, tuning the drums the way that we were able to match that sound too.
Yeah.
And it sure paid off, because and it's not easy, and that you had to, you know, Levon called it the best seat in the house, but then for you it was certainly the hardest, the biggest shoes to fill, just as far as being able to be the foundation of that song, of those songs.
I just wanted it to be, you know, that people would hear it and think, you know, that's pretty, you know, I didn't want anybody to go, he didn't play anything like that, you know, why did he do that, you know, because that doesn't even sound anything like what the band would have done. That's what I didn't want to happen.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, at least you could say, well, yeah, he tried, you know. You know, I just didn't want it to be, well, he just went and just did his own version of it.
Yeah, sure. And it certainly helped, you know, Paul Asola was Levon's bass player, Bones Malone played, and most people there had, you know, played with him before in some capacities. So I hope we get to do it again one of these days. So your effort actually will, you know, pay more dividends, if you will.
Let's go do it as much as we can. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Hey, just for a minute, let's get technical, and I would love for you to mention some of the gear you've been using or you're using currently.
Okay. Well, live, what I use is it's a company out of Southern California called Masters of Maple, and it's just this guy. He makes all his own drums. He makes his shells. He does all the lamination and stuff. So anyway, it's a small kit. It's just a 14 by 22 kick drum, and then a 9 by 13, 16 by 16 tom. Just a 3-piece. My cymbals are different variations of Peisty stuff. Some of it is signature series. Some of it is 602s. Just different stuff. And like as we're sitting here, I have what I've been using in my place is a 1962 Silver Sparkle Ludwig kit. And it's basically the same as the Masters of Maple size-wise. It's the same, 14 by 22, and then 13, 16 tom. And I have just some different snare drums. I have a couple of the Masters of Maple drums. I have a 6.5 by 14 brass, and then I have another. It's a 5.5 by 14 Brazilian rosewood, and it's a Masters of Maple, and then some the 62 chrome over brass Ludwig snare. I use that a lot, and then just some different stuff. And then I have a Gretsch kit, and then I have a Camco kit here at the house that I use in the studio for different things.
Yeah.
So I do stuff. I have a studio here at home, and I do tracks for. I'm a gun for hire. You need drums, call me.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I have stuff here at the house that so I can have a variation of different things.
Sure.
Yeah.
What about sticks?
Sticks. I've always since the early '90s, I've always used Vic Firth. Vic Firth sticks, and I've been with Peisty since the early '90s. Remo drum heads, and and that's it.
Yeah.
That's all my stuff.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that if there's any drummers listening, that they get some of that, in there. And I know that some of those companies have been real good to you too. Absolutely. Over the years.
Yeah.
So you've been doing sessions a lot. More recently, you've been getting calls from a producer engineer here in town. His name is Tom Utes. He's mainly bluegrass specialist,
right.
Also guitar player.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit how you got into bluegrass, because that's something I would have not associated with your playing before. Mm-hmm. And maybe also kind of I know it's somewhat of a different job you have playing on those bluegrass sessions. Yeah,
it is. And well, I met Tom, we were on a live gig. He was playing electric, and the artist, I think John Brannon was his name. And I'd played on a record for John, and so we were doing a live thing here in Nashville, and Tom was a guitar player on it. And so that's where I met Tom, and he asked me if I would want to do some stuff at his studio. I said, sure, call me. And, and it was a lot of bluegrass stuff, bluegrass and Americana. And I was not experienced at doing that kind of stuff at all, And so, just when we first started doing sessions, when I first started doing a session with Tom, I knew it was brush, and I knew how to do, like train stuff and different things. And so on some of those earlier sessions, like on certain songs, like certain tempos, like we'd be playing with the click, and like to do a train beat at a slower tempo, I had to figure out different ways to do it instead of just, right, left kind of stuff. At slower tempos, I would make notes in my phone and go, practice this train beat at this tempo. And so I'd come home and figure out different ways, different stickings to play those kind of slow train beat things. And so it was a really good experience, and like playing on those sessions, and be a mandolin player, and they're a mandolin players, the drum. He's the drummer of the bluegrass band,
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I was always real aware of that and not wanting to get in their way, and so I would just try to listen to what they're doing and try to just kind of embellish what they were doing instead of trying to take over or play exactly what they were playing. So it's been a learning process over the last few years since I've been working with Tom, but it was really good to be put in that situation and just figure out different, and listen. And I would come back and I would listen to different things. I couldn't tell you who I was listening to, but listen to different artists that like bluegrass stuff that had drums on it, or artists that they like to listen to, and get an idea of what they're doing. And, different things that I would hear. Like I would hear different drummers on other recordings do things that wasn't a bluegrass recording, but it was something that could be applied to that. So I would hear stuff like that and go, well, that would be cool to use in this situation. So kind of make a mental note of that and try to apply that to those situations. So it's a lot of fun, like you might just go in and play open snare with your fingers, which it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter if it's if it feels good and it sounds good, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those. I played on bubble wrap one time, so it doesn't matter. So as long as it fits.
Yeah. And somebody else you worked with or for a lot, maybe more than anybody else, is Gary Nicholson.
Yeah.
And Gary and I, or whenever Gary introduces, he usually says, and Lynn Williams, my favorite drummer in the world, something that Gary and I actually, share.
Oh, wow.
So maybe just a little bit about how do you, get hooked up with Gary and maybe some of the most memorable projects you've done with him.
Well, Gary, he was one of the first guys that I met when I came to town. And it's, I said earlier about when I was playing with Russ and how it's like this big wheel of people that I met and worked with. And Gary was one of those guys because when I was with Russ, we played this gig here in town, and there was an artist named Ashley Cleveland that opened for us. And so the guy that was playing guitar for her then was Kenny Greenberg, who they're married now. And so that's how I met Gary, because Gary was friends with Kenny, and so Gary found out about me maybe through Kenny or Leroy. They were both friends too. And so Gary called me and wanted to know if I could do some live gigs. He played gigs around town. And so I would go do gigs with him, and of course the rest of his band were all these big session guys, and but it was great. It was I felt like this little fish in a big pond, kind of a little bit scary first getting into it, but Gary's been a friend for a long time, and I always enjoy working with Gary any chance I get, and we've worked on a lot of projects together. He produced the first 2 or 3 Delbert records I played on.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of intersections there with Gary and Delbert.
Yeah, like the one that sticks out is the Billy Joe Shaver record that
a couple of years ago. Yeah.
And there's been other projects, it's funny, he sent me a song one time to put drums on, and so I put drums on it. Then I find out later there's a guy, and I kind of knew who it was when I heard it, there's no lyrics. It's just piano and a click track, and a guy singing a melody. There's no lyrics, and it turned out it was Leon Russell. So, and that was not too long before he passed away. But yeah, it's it's been a good run with Gary, and we get to play together every Tuesday night.
Yeah.
So
you have 3 sons, and they're all individually talented in different fields. But Jonathan has become a drummer.
yeah.
How did that happen? Because of your encouragement, despite, or
Well, no, I mean, I didn't. I never encouraged, but I never discouraged either. There was always a drum set in the house, and so since they were little, they would play, get on the drum set and bang around and stuff. And then Jonathan, through his younger years, he played Little League baseball and all that. And gosh, when he got out of high school, he thought he wanted to go play college ball and stuff and do that. And he had always messed around with drums. He was in a drum line when he was younger, 12, 13 years old. He was what they called in the pit. He would do mallet stuff, and I think one of his last years he marched with cymbals. It was like an independent drum line. And so anyway, so that was a really good experience for him, but he really didn't aspire to try to make it a living doing it, so it wasn't until he got out of high school and then he decided he didn't want to play baseball, and he was living in Dallas at the time, and he decided he wanted to play music. So I had to remind him that they do that here in Nashville, that a lot of people play music and make a living doing that. So he moved home, yeah. And so he's been in, a couple of original bands, searching for the record deal, and he's really talented. I mean, he's a lot more talented than I was at that age, because he has a lot of production ideas and stuff, and that's kind of where he leans towards more than just playing drums. He's a great drummer, but he plays some keyboards, and he does a lot of remixing stuff and recording, and so that's kind of what he wants to get into. Yeah.
So and you must be proud.
I am. I'm very proud of him. I'm proud of all 3 of them. They're all doing real well. So can't complain.
So we're almost at the end. What's coming up for you?
Well, right now it's it's that slow time of the year, January, February. So it's right now just a few sessions here, and I've got some stuff I'm doing in my studio. A guy's sending me some stuff to do here, and then kind of at some point the Wallflowers are going to be touring again this year, and so kind of just getting mentally ready for that and thinking, okay, I could be gone for a long time this summer, so what do I need to get done now, So just thinking more along those lines.
Yeah.
And always looking for the next thing. We're always looking for a gig.
Sure. Yeah. And quick question here too. You mentioned mentally getting ready, but how about physically? I mean, you're not old or anything, but you're not a spring chicken either.
No.
And drumming is a physical job, and I think, what does it take for you to stay in shape physically?
Well, the sessions that I do, those aren't that physically demanding, But now when we tour, the Wallflowers thing is more physically demanding to me than the other stuff that I do. So, like for me now, my mind is thinking, well, I need to just start playing more, longer every day, like longer periods, you know. So at some point, I'll start playing these songs again, and just kind of going over the show here in my little studio, and bashing it out and sweating, and you know, just kind of getting prepared, and probably I should probably exercise more. I should probably start, you know, doing some aerobic stuff to get ready. Maybe lose a few pounds.
All right, well, let's wrap this up with one more thing. And we went down to Muscle Shoals and recorded an album with what we call the Muscle Shoals Allstars, which is David Hood and Jimmy Johnson, Clayton Ivey, Will McFarlane, and the Muscle Shoals horns and singers and all, with Carla Russell as the featured singer. And that record is actually coming out a month from now. Let's just finish it up with maybe a couple thoughts about, you know, Carla and that project.
Yeah, well, yeah, you know, it's again just getting to work with all those guys down there, you know. But and Carla, what a great singer Carla is, you know. And the songs are really great. I remember when you sent me that record, I would sit and listen to it and just think, man, that's me playing with all those guys, you know. And it's a great sounding record. Yeah, I'm real proud of it, you know. I can't wait for other people to hear it. And I hope what would be awesome is to get that band together and do some shows with Carla.
Yeah, that's the plan for sure.
Well, I hope so. I hope we get a chance to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a great time, great experience, and that's been a while too, you know.
It has been a while. It's, you know, I think we started like, I don't know, a year and a half ago at least.
Yeah.
So.
But I can see Clayton and David looking at each other, and you know their little thing that they do sometimes. So
pointing out.
Yeah.
Their
and it brings a smile to my face.
Sure does. Hey Lynn, thanks so much for spending this hour with me.
Absolutely.
And talking about I learned quite a bit here myself that we haven't even had a chance to.
You might know me a little better now, huh?
Maybe. Anyway, hey, I wish you just all the best for the future and hope we get to collaborate on more great things. We already got a couple sessions booked, so
yeah.
There's hope.
We're definitely not done. So yeah, for sure. Well, I appreciate inviting me to do this, and I've enjoyed it. I don't know if I've ever done this before, but I've enjoyed it. So thanks for asking me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This was the 20th episode of the Crazy Chester Radio Hour. We taped it at Lynn Williams' home studio in Mount Juliet. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Until next week.